This is a story of the Cherokee removal. The Cherokee Nation was one of great wealth and prosperity. They had a thriving judicial system that was praised by Thomas Jefferson himself. They were also recognized as one of the five civilized tribes. However, the white settlers resented the Cherokee and wanted them removed. This is a story of triumph and tragedy. Due to the Indian Removal Act, the Cherokee Indians lost precious land and culture because the United States government's desire for the land west of the Mississippi River. Many people believed that signing treaties would be the best way to handle the tensions. However, the United States broke every treaty they signed with the Native Americans, especially the Cherokee. There was always tension between the white settlers and the Cherokee Nation. The settlers resented the Cherokee Nation mainly because they wanted the land that the Cherokee Nation occupied. The Cherokee feared the white settlers because they worried they would kick them off their lands. George Washington's way of handling the tensions was to make the Cherokee Indians as much like white people as possible. The Cherokee embraced this and began to participate in American society. Many became landowners, and some owned businesses and owned slaves. The became recognized as one of the five civilized tribes for their efforts. Despite this, the Cherokee Indians were still despised amongst the white settlers. These tensions escalated when the settlers learned that there was gold in the Cherokee lands. The Jackson administration sided with the settlers. They believed that it was time for the Cherokee Indians to move off their land in order to make room for the white people. The state of Georgia believed so strong in state rights that it refused to send representatives to the Supreme Court to represent them. However, they eventually agreed to send a representative to the Supreme Court. The state of Georgia and the Cherokee Nation faced each other in two famous court cases: Georgia versus Cherokee Nation 1831 and Georgia versus Cherokee Nation 1832. The state of Georgia was victorious in the first case, and which left the people of the Cherokee Nation in the hands of the land-greedy people of Georgia. However, the Cherokee was victorious versus the state of Georgia in the case of 1832, and this granted them custody over their land. Despite the court's orders, United States President Andrew Jackson refused to send troops to Georgia to protect the Cherokee lands. As a former soldier and one who had a military background, he had little sympathy for the Cherokee. He ordered the U.S. government to construct the Treaty of Dakota, which would justify the eventual removal. The leaders of the Cherokee Nation announced that anyone who signed an agreement to give up Cherokee land would be executed. Despite this, U.S. government was able to persuade a group of 100 pro-removal Cherokee Indians led by Chief Major Ridge to sign the treaty. These representatives were not elected by the Cherokee Nation. They were aware that they would be executed upon their return to Georgia by the Cherokee Nation for signing the treaty. Because of this, they signed death warrants. The Treaty of Dakota stated that in exchange for compensation, the Cherokee would give up their ancestral homelands to the U.S. government. These lands would then be settled by the white settlers. The Cherokee Indians would be relocated west of the Mississippi River to Oklahoma. However, not everyone supported the Indian Removal Act. For example, Davy Crockett opposed it, for he claimed that it was immoral and that it violated the agreements the government had with the Native Americans. After the signing of the treaty, Andrew Jackson and his government sent troops to force the Cherokee Indians off their land. Although they were instructed to be friendly, they used harsh tactics to force the Cherokee. The Cherokee that refused to leave were either placed in military detention camps or were forced off with brutal force. Some of the Cherokee took up arms and attempted to fight off the army. This tactic however, did not work as they were defeated easily and many of the soldiers in the Cherokee army were killed. 11,500 Cherokee Indians were forced to walk the Trail of Tears. Of them, 4,000 died. Malaria was also very common due to the amount of mosquitoes. Germs were spread due to poor sanitation. The Cherokee did not have a stable water supply. They drank from the fresh water sources they could find, which consisted of rivers, lakes, and streams. Often, there were no fresh water sources available, which led to deaths from extreme dehydration. Food was also a large problem, as they had no stable food supply. The men would hunt when they could. During the winter, it was too cold to hunt, and the Cherokee had to survive on small daily rations. A large amount of them died of starvation. Due to these food shortages, many of the Indians were not able to meet their dietary needs and grew weak. Likewise, the clothing was inadequate for the cold, which caused many to experience hypothermia. Some of the elders gave their blankets to the sick children at the expense of their own health. The wagons they used were the only source of shelter. There was not enough room for everyone in those wagons, and many had to sleep on the cold, hard ground. Another hardship was that the Cherokee were abused and harassed by the soldiers. Soldiers were sent with the Cherokee to make sure that they were traveling towards Oklahoma and that they stayed in line. They implemented very harsh rules that the Indians had to follow. For example, they were not allowed to bury their loved ones. The soldiers that wanted to grow cotton were particularly abusive. They derailed the Indian spirits in order to make sure that they would receive the land the Indians previously occupied. Some of the Cherokee Indians began to face toxic mental states, and a few even committed suicide. Cherokee struggles in the Trail of Tears left an everlasting impact and legacy. Because of it, the Cherokee Nation crumbled and fell apart. Cherokee Indians lost their identity. Much of the culture, land, and traditions that were precious to the Cherokee were lost. After this event, many Cherokee Indians experienced intense trauma and flashbacks from the Trail of Tears. A large number of them died and experienced intense psychological damage. After the Indian Removal Act was completed, Andrew Jackson stated, "Hopefully, these aliens can adapt to American society and become civilians." What he means when he says this is that he hopes that the American Indians lose their culture and identity and envelop themselves in American society to become regular Americans. Some of the Cherokee Indians were able to adapt to American society. They became farmers and started businesses. During the 1900s, the United States government began to send children of the Cherokee Nation to boarding schools with the intention of erasing their cultural identity. They were whipped when they spoke their native language. They were also taught English and learned American customs and proper American behavior. The Trail of Tears got its name because when the Indians cried, their tears dried up on the sand and formed into crystals. Many people have found ways to honor the Cherokee Indians' tragedy at the Trail of Tears. The Cherokee Cultural Center has a Trails of Tears exhibit. The Museum of Native American History hosts an annual art show honoring the Trail of Tears. In Oklahoma, they have an annual bike ride where riders ride the trail that was walked by the American Indians. Oklahoma has also begun to create graves to remember those that died on the Trail of Tears. What we can learn from this horrible event It's the importance of being able to work with people who are different from you in order to come up with a compromise that is healthy for everyone.